communication is the start of any understanding because you need to understand to be able to love and connect with one another, right? So my name is Moza-Bella, and thank you and welcome to Lessons from Failures. So we are here today and we have Miss Drita, and I just can't wait for you to hear from her. She is in the business for 20 years. I mean, she looks too young to be in 20 years in the business, but here she is with us today. Thank you for being here with me, and I'm just so happy to see you and meet you in person finally.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. This is so important, and I feel very honored to speak with you.
Oh my gosh, so we've been working together for like a year.
Yes.
And here we are in Miami. Yeah. Right? It's hot and humid.
It's hot and humid. That is true.
It's been a struggle, but here you are. So tell us again. Now, what is the number one misconception about communication in different languages?
So I think the biggest key for people to understand is that if you think about language, even if you're talking about English to English, people have difficulty communicating in their own language with people that speak their language, right? So when you add a layer to it of another language, there's that additional barrier. Mm-hmm. So communication becomes even more complex and more convoluted because now you don't necessarily understand the words the person is speaking to. You're trying to understand them, but you maybe understand 10% or 20% or 30% of what they're saying, but you're missing most of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, is that why you've been in the business of translation and interpretation for like 20 years?
Years, yes. So our biggest goal is we try to help people break down those communication gaps. So they no longer have difficulty communicating, whether it's in writing, through a document translation, an advertisement, any written form, or in the spoken word with the help of interpreters. So we basically take somebody who maybe only speaks English, somebody who only speaks Spanish, for example, and we put them together and we provide an interpreter. And that person serves as the physical and verbal bridge, basically. So the person speaking English can speak freely. The person in Spanish hears it in Spanish, they understand, they're able to speak back in Spanish, and that flow goes like that. That's what we do. We really bridge that gap.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful. Now, so how many different languages that you serve the community?
Well, I love to say we do everything from Albanian to Vietnamese. So
some A to V, right?
A to V, not A to B, A to V. And really, any language. We have so many languages spoken here in the United States. Clearly Arabic is a big one, Chinese, we have Haitian Creole, we've got Portuguese, Spanish, French, Russian, Vietnamese, Korean, so many languages. We work with all of them. And then some of the off the beaten path languages too that you may not even have heard of, like Twi or Dari, which is spoken in Afghanistan.
Wow.
So really all of them.
Right. Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. And you have a lot of professional translators and interpreters working for you or, for your company.
We have people all over the world. We have people in Egypt, in Brazil, Canada, parts of India. It's amazing. It's such a global business. It feels like we're connected with people all over the world, literally through these translations and interpreters. It's unbelievable.
Right. The reason why I love what you do, I appreciate and I admire what you do is because like English is my secondary language, right? So I understand that there's some concepts or like certain idioms that is not easy. Like you can't just Google or chat GPT and it wouldn't be able to pick it up. So that's why I think it's so important for us to have this conversation, today, because so if two people have different languages, that means you come from different cultures, different backgrounds, right? So you have different reality than mine. So my reality is different than yours. And without the connection, authentic, genuine connection, there's no way that we can work together and there's no true love, right?
Exactly.
So tell me more about, so I know that you have a lot of stories. So what happened when people don't have the understand, beyond the language barrier?
That's a great topic. And so what tends to happen is when people don't understand not just the linguistic, but the cultural components of communication, they can make huge mistakes, So for example, if you take an ad, let's say for a car company, and they're doing an ad for the English-speaking population, They may do it one way. They may use certain, like you said, idiomatic expressions, play on words or double meaning of a word or something that's just genuinely very American, very much understood by the American English-speaking population. You can't just simply take that same ad and put it in Spanish and hope that it's going to work, because the Spanish culture, not just the language, but the culture, they react differently to images. They react differently to certain colors, certain words. They have different cultural contexts of things. So maybe for them, they would approach buying a car or seeing a car ad in a very different way than we would. So you can't just it's not like Nike, just do it. You can't just translate it.
That's right. That's
we
true.
have a thing what we call it's localization. So it's basically adapting the text, the copy, whatever the words are, however you want to refer to them, and we adapt them to match the language and the culture. So it's not just the words. So you're right. Google Translate can't do that. ChatGPT can't do it. None of the machine kind of online tools can really capture the nuances of language. The very, very subtle things in language. So you can't count on them for very important documents that are outgoing to the public, advertisements, things like that. You just can't do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now, is there any experience or any stories that you feel like somehow like we fail, your clients or the public?
Right. I mean, there's a couple of things that stand out, but one of the more recent stories I had was with a school district we work with, and the child's name is Jail, and I believe it's pronounced Jail. Right?
Yeah. Oh, Jail.
Jail.
Yeah,
but it's spelled like jail. The word jail in English.
Yes.
So of course, when that goes through the machine translation, it doesn't understand that that's a student name or a human name. It's not a common noun, right?
Right.
But then it translates it into jail or prison. And imagine parents receiving a document about their child. They don't really understand the educational system. They don't know how things work. They've never really been to a meeting with a school. And then they get this document and their son is being referred to as something very negative. So it causes more confusion, more miscommunication, distrust, separation. So we're trying to connect when we communicate, right? We're trying to connect with people. We're trying to understand them. We're trying to engage with them. And this is disengaging the population by doing these mistakes that could have been easily overlooked if you had a human involved.
It's so true. And like you said, right? So the impact is so profound, because now think about, just a child, right? And then, with that, they try so hard to emerge, right? To fit in. And here you are, that will impact you emotionally and psychologically. And it's hard. It's very
There's so many repercussions.
Oh, absolutely.
So
and just for something very simple.
Very simple. But this is what I say. Language is complex. Whether we're speaking English, Vietnamese, Spanish, it really doesn't matter. Communication is complex.
Yes.
And so when you add this layer to it, you add another language to it, another culture, it just makes it even more complex and challenging. So you have to have professionals, you have to have people that are truly like fully bilingual. So many people say, oh, I'm bilingual. But what they mean is that, like maybe English is my native language and I learned some Spanish in high school and I spent a summer in Mexico and I did a semester abroad in Spain. And I speak Spanish, I'm bilingual. But they're not really bilingual.
They're not trained. They're not professional.
Trained. They don't know how to read and write and know the grammar and really have the natural connection to the language that a native speaker has. So we have a rule in translation where you always translate into your native language. So for example, if your native language is Vietnamese, you would translate from English into Vietnamese, but not Vietnamese into English. Because no matter how well, and you have beautiful English, but no matter how well you know it, the native language is always the strongest. Right?
Yes, that is so true. That is so true. Yes, absolutely.
So
that is
there's
so
things
true.
like that you have to take into consideration also.
And I know that, you have provided, you and your staff, your company have provided this solution to a lot of organizations, for-profit, non-profit, in education system. Like I saw the list of all of your customers.
Yeah.
It's like a long list, and it were just like the highlights, and those are like big organizations too.
Right.
So congratulations for
Thank you.
having those contracts with those people.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, one of my favorites is we work with Project Bread, which is a large nonprofit that works in the food security or insecurity business. And sometimes I'm driving in Boston and I see a bus go by or a subway, and there's a billboard and it's in Spanish and it's for that agency. And I think that's really what it's all about, right? We're connecting, we're helping them.
Yeah.
In this case, this large nonprofit connect with the population that they wouldn't otherwise reach.
Yeah.
If their information, if their messaging, if their advertising was in English only.
Yeah.
And they do multiple languages, not just Spanish.
Right.
They do, I think, Haitian Creole, they do Portuguese, they do Russian, they do Indian language, I believe. So they're really trying to get the message out of like, here is this resource. This is a resource for the community that's maybe challenged in terms of finances. Maybe they don't have enough money to buy quality food for their family. And here's this amazing organization that can help them, but they don't know about it because it wasn't in English, but Project Bread does that. And so that's what we try to get across to folks, that in the nonprofit world, for example, if they have a service, they provide some kind of a service, or they have programs for children in the summer, anything like that, really they have to put it in other languages so that the parents, the families understand what it's about.
Right.
Because the kids maybe know, but they don't know how to convey it to the parents.
Right.
So we have to have it in their native language so they can say, oh, there's a summer program at the local YMCA. I didn't know that existed.
That's right.
Oh, there's scholarships available? I wouldn't have known. Maybe they wouldn't know what the word scholarship is. You know? But if they have it in their language, then they understand. Then they're connected, truly connected to that organization.
And it's so fundamental, right? I mean, think about it. Like, you put a lot of effort and resources into like something available there, but the people that you want to help have no idea.
No idea.
So there's a big gap.
Huge
so
gap.
You, the person that can just connect the gap.
That's what I will say. We bridge that gap. We fill in that gap by providing these language resources. And they have access. They have access to information. They have access to programs. They have access to services that otherwise they wouldn't know about. They wouldn't be on an equal footing. We say, we talk about equality, inclusion, all of these things. And this is really through language access, through providing these documents, these meetings, interpreting meetings for people that maybe they want to be engaged in their community. Maybe there's an issue in their community and they want to speak about it. But if they go to a public, meeting, they're not going to be able to share their thoughts because nobody's there to help them with the language. And that's where we come in.
Amazing. And I know that, like, especially in Miami. So so what do you think the number of Spanish speaking community? So, is it a bigger or smaller?
You're going to be really surprised by this number. It is 69% of the population in Miami.
Wow.
Would list Spanish as their native language spoken at home. 69%.
So it's more than half.
It's more than half. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so, I mean, there's other languages as well, but that's really the dominant one. Yeah. So my question is, how could you have a business or a program or a service or do anything in the city without putting everything in at least Spanish? That's if nothing else. Because if you think about it, those are all customers or people that you could engage with that they can't engage with you because they're not able to communicate with you.
So true.
So it's a win-win for everybody, for businesses if they want to engage. I'm sure the schools have a system of engaging with the parents in other languages. Yeah. Usually the school is like the connection to the community, right? So many people have children, and if you have children, they're in the school, and then there's that connection. But outside of that, businesses, any kind of business you can imagine, from a nail salon to phone services to a painting business, a roofing, like any business you could think of, if they're not reaching out to folks in Spanish and putting their materials in Spanish, they are missing out on 69% of the population in this city.
Yes, and we cannot rely on ChatGPT.
No. It's definitely not going to get advertising messages right.
Right, and if you miss the reason why, then go back to the the beginning of the interview, and then you understand why. So what would be, one thing that you would like for people to remember about the importance of communication beyond the language barrier?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything in life comes down to communication. Whether it's a friendship, a business relationship, a romantic relationship, any kind of relationship, the key is, they say communication is key, right? That's a phrase we hear. And it's no different with language. We just are adding a layer, a complexity, really,
Mhm.
when you add a language to it.
Right.
But I think we have to be clear in our communication. We have to depend on humans to do the work.
Yep.
If you're relying solely on machines and robots and apps to do the work for you, there's going to be errors. And even with humans, there's still sometimes errors, but you have a much less likelihood because the human is reviewing the information. They know the culture, they know the language.
Yes.
They're putting their eyes on it. And that can't guarantee 100%, but it's the closest thing you're going to get. The machines are never going to get that close.
Right, right.
know?
And like you said, right, it's not just the language, but it's connection.
Connection.
Because communication is connecting.
Yeah.
And only human and human can connect.
I have a great final story. So years ago, they wanted to put these video carts into hospitals. And they'd pull up a cart, and then an interpreter would appear on the screen, and the patient is in the bed. And they were it was disjointed. Because oftentimes it was an older person, somebody who really, had a very big disconnect linguistically, culturally. And then they'd roll this cart in and they'd see this person on like a little mini TV screen. And the hospitals ended up getting rid of it because the patients complained so much about it.
Yeah,
because what they wanted was an interpreter, somebody to stand by them, put their hand on their arm, be there in the room with them to feel that they were connected to this person who was truly helping them. They didn't know who the person in the box was.
Right, absolutely.
And they didn't know where they were, who they were. They had no connection to them. And
So true.
So they really had to do away with it. And they still use it in emergency situations. But honestly, that's the greatest example to me of how you cannot replace the human presence, the human connection that we so depend on.
That is so profound. And thank you. I'm so glad that we have this chance to have this conversation.
So amazing. Thank you.
So this is just a beginning, and I know that you have other projects to help the community in a bigger scale.
We're working on some great things.
Yes, so that we can wait to have another conversation, and then we're going to talk about that.
To be continued. Thank you so much.
All right, Drita. Thank you. And thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.